Turkey has endorsed Swedish succession into NATO. Erdogan has yet gave another huge bitch slap to Putin's face. It wasn't enough that he sent the Azovstal commanders home, although he personally had signed a deal with Putin, claiming that they will be in Turkey as POWs until the war ends, but now he gave them free to Ukraine and he let Sweden join NATO. It was all behind Turkey. The NATO summit in Vilnius is going on, and I'm just gonna wanna show you a quick clip where the good news came from.
Because the agreement we made yesterday will make Sweden a full member of NATO.
Hooray.
That will make our alliance even more capable of defending all allies.
Yes, good. I have a map here open for you which shows you exactly why am I so into this topic and everybody in Northern Europe, because look at Estonia. Before Finland got accepted into NATO, we were surrounded by the Gulf of Finland, the Baltic Sea, and from the east Russia. And Russia's Baltic is stationed in St. Petersburg, and they were terrorizing us all the time by crossing into Estonian waters and by flying over Estonian airspace. Well, now Finland and Sweden joining NATO will make the Baltic Sea NATO's internal sea. And I'll zoom into a very specific island. It's gonna get pixelated, but let's bear with me. This island right here is a strategically very important island, and Sweden is heavily militarizing it right now. Who owns this island, who controls it militarily, controls the Baltic Sea and the waterways. Currently, Russia is allowed to use a very narrow strip of waterway to connect from St. Petersburg to Kaliningrad Oblast, and we cannot take that away from them because they need to get here somehow, because they cannot fly over Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania or Poland, so they have this extremely narrow path, and everything else is filled with NATO ships from now on. This photo summarizes it perfectly. Look, Gulf of Brotherhood, Lake NATO, and Putin is saying, trust me, I'm playing 4D chess. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov commented on Turkey's acceptance for Sweden to join NATO that Russia will react similarly as they did to the Finnish accession into NATO. It means that they're not going to react at all, because they didn't really react to the Finnish accession into NATO because they can't. Look at it. Look at the Finnish border. It's what, 800 kilometers of an area that is extremely poorly connected with roads and rail. This area is swampy, it has a lot of lakes, and it's almost permafrost all over the place. It is impossible to protect this border, and it's also impossible to man it all the way. So Finnish accession into NATO adds 800 kilometers of threat to Russians. Most of their forces are fighting in Ukraine, so this is a huge blow. Only Finland, and now Sweden is going to join also. You would say that Finland is a bigger threat on land and Sweden is a bigger threat on the sea, because Sweden has a fleet. But now, my friends, I'm going to zoom into Berdyansk, the port city of Russian-occupied Ukraine. The biggest port, actually. It's a vacation area. As you can see, it's a beachy area, a lot of beaches. If you wouldn't know what was going on, you would say this is, I don't know, France, for example. Beaches on this side also, and I'm gonna zoom into a very specific hotel, Dune. A lieutenant general of the Russian army, Oleg Tsakov, was staying in this hotel. He actually made it his headquarters, and boom, he got visited by Storm Shadow. Knocking on the door, and suddenly Oleg Tsakov was smoking carelessly and he's no more, liquidated. Bystanders say that there is not much left of the hotel, but it astounds me how Russia is able to lose regularly such high-ranking officers, training these officers. We're not talking about lieutenants, we're talking about lieutenant generals. Decades, it takes decades. Since August 2022, he commanded the 144th Motorized Rifle Division of the 20th Combined Arms Army of the Russian Federation. Yes, these names can get pretty long and clumsy. He received the rank of Lieutenant General in 2023, and in addition to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, he was a veteran of 2 Chechen wars and the Russian invasion of Syria. And now this Russian invasion of Ukraine, a man with 4 wars on his name, liquidated. This kind of experience of 4 wars cannot be trained. Alright, let's zoom out from Berdyansk. We have more news coming from the Antonovsky Bridge next to the Kherson, and Ukrainians have actually widened their bridgehead. I'm very much rooting for Ukrainians on this front, because this bridgehead here is very heroic action. They have about 100 to 150 man unit covering this entire area, and they can't really bring more because the area is soft and very swampy and Russians are very close by, so it's full infantry play, and they still managed, the Ukrainians I mean, to enlarge their bridgehead. This is the Koinka River, not the Dnipro but the Koinka. It runs right in front of Oleshki, the sister settlement of Kherson, And Ukrainians crossed this river now, the Gornka River, so they're pushing closer and closer to Oleshki from each side. This information actually comes from a Russian military blogger. These urbanized areas, these are dachas probably. Dacha is like a Russian or Ukrainian styled vacation home next to water usually. These dachas are liberated by the Ukrainians, and this probably is a dry area here, but if you go a little bit to the east, you can see this area where there is no trees growing because it's a swamp. Yeah, we have a lot of those in Estonia. You cannot really cross it with anything except barefoot, and even then it's difficult. So I don't see Ukrainians forcing this straight on. Maybe they will follow the tree lines like that and then cross the Chaika River into these dacha areas right here. Anyway, the fact that Russians have tried everything, they have even attacked Ukrainians with their cruise missiles, which the Russians don't really do, because cruise missiles for Russians are for civilian targets, because they never attack military targets with cruise missiles. Well, they did. And it didn't do much. It didn't dislodge the Ukrainians. Brave guys right here. Salute. My friends, this here is Anton Gerashenko. He is advisor to the Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, and I follow him, I like his opinions, and I want to read one of his tweets. The gas war with Europe will cost the Russian budget 28 billion USD. Due to the loss of European gas market, where almost 80% of Gazprom's exports went before the war, Russian Federal Treasury will lose 28 billion USD in tax revenues in 2023, according to the analysts at Vegan Consulting. RIA Novosti. This is according to Russian data analysts, so it even might be sugar-coated. It's already really bad. In terms of rubles, at the current exchange rate, the gas leak in the government's revenues will amount to almost 2.6 trillion rubles, unfathomable amount, an amount comparable to the annual budget of the state medicine, which is 2.9 trillion rubles. Gazprom itself will lose about 90 billion USD in revenue compared to last year. Holy hell! The Russian budget was in deficit for the first time in like 15 years last year, and that's only the beginning. The sanctions are starting to work. As you can see, the ruble is at rock bottom. For the first time in history, for €1 you get over 100 rubles, meaning ruble is extremely cheap right now. That's not me saying buy the ruble. No, that's me saying sell the ruble, get rid of it, because it's a useless currency. It also reflects the situation in the Russian economy perfectly, although they try to hide it. Earlier I mentioned the liquidation of the Russian Lieutenant General, but that is not it. Stanislav Rezinsky, deputy head of the Russian Mobilization Department, was shot dead during his morning run. He was shot 4 times in the back. The shooter ran away and he died on the spot. This was a planned murder, a planned liquidation. If I was a Russian general in Russia, I would not feel safe. My pulse would be 200 right now. Generals being liquidated left and right in Russia. It is starting to resemble the 90s again. In the former Soviet countries and in Russia, the 90s was a very turbulent time. It could be compared to what the United States had at the high time of the mob activity. I'm not sure actually which era was that in the USA, but in Estonia, in Russia, in Lithuania, it was the 90s. In Estonia, for example, during the 90s, they shot 1.5 people in one day. That was the official statistics. It was about 450 people a year shot dead with firearms. And Estonia has a strict firearm law, so that was the 90s for Estonia, and this was the same in Russia. And this is starting to resemble it, to Putin's government. We got a video of Finnish minister, yes, a Finnish minister of European Affairs, a minister playing cello like this. He's playing a Ukrainian national song, Oi Luci Chervona Kalina. I really love that song. It's beautiful. Every time I listen to it, I get goosebumps and I want to cry. I started that on accordion, so we're gonna go on with the video, but I'm gonna leave it playing in the background because it's pretty as hell. And when I was in Kiev, every time actually, I just came back, but I mean, they're singing that song on the streets there. People are singing it, radios are playing it, everybody knows about it. We were giving cars to the units, and now it's just like, Oi Luci Chervona Kalina, and the soldiers start singing it with me. It's a crazy feeling. The NATO summit in Vilnius has started, and as expected, some big information bombs are coming out of it, and I'll start with the French. The French have gotten a lot of hate for their kind of slow response to this war, like the Germans, but this is over. This is Emmanuel Macron, the French president, announcing that French will be sending Storm Shadow to the Ukrainians. Yes, if you didn't know, Storm Shadow was actually a joint co-production of the French and the British, but the British sent it first. So everybody's saying, oh, it's the British weapon, but actually the French got butthurt and they were like, no, it's our weapon too. We put billions into it, and they did. Storm Shadow is a huge deal. we never actually analyzed what this weapon is and why is it a game changer. But it is. The only negative side with this weapon is the cost. It's about £2.2 million per missile. But it has a huge range and a huge warhead, and it's very precise. I'm gonna make that mistake up to you for not opening up what the Storm Shadow is and what is its capability. So we're gonna watch a video now about Storm Shadow. After this video, you will know everything and anything about Storm Shadow that you will have to know. I mean, this is a great weapon. I only wish it was cheaper.
This is the Storm Shadow cruise missile, a British-French joint program to produce a low observable missile. Don't be fooled by its innocent...
Already low observable, this is one of the best things about it, very hard to detect. It uses radar absorbing material, so the crosshair on the radar is extremely small.
Looks as it could penetrate around 4 to 5 meters or 16 feet of concrete.
16 feet?
It does this by storing 2 explosives, a precursor at the front and a follow-through bomb at the back. We will also be diving into the interior of the missile and the systems associated with it. Not to forget, we will be explaining the basic step-by-step process of how it might work in a battle-tested environment. So stay tuned and don't miss a beat. Storm Shadow missiles can be launched from the Dassault Rafale, the Eurofighter Typhoon, and most recently the MiG-29 or the Su-27 jets, as shown here in the animations. It is a low-observable air-launched cruise missile. Interestingly, the development of the Storm Shadow missile is also known as Scalp EG in France. This missile has a length of 5.2 meters or 17 feet, while it has a breadth of 630 millimeters or 25 inches, but opening its wingspan measures around 3 meters or 9 feet 8 inches. It weighs around 450 kilograms or 900 pounds. Comparing this to a person will help you understand its size. Even better, let's compare this to the American cruise missile or the Russian missile.
Yeah, they compare it to Kinzhal and Tomahawk, of course. Russia has about 60 to 70 Kinzhal missiles altogether in their country. It's not, and their main nuclear program is based on the Kinzhal missile. I mean, it's supposed to be the missile who delivers the nuclear threats and nuclear warheads to another country. Well, Storm Shadow was not meant for that. So I don't think these missiles here are actually comparable.
As you see, it looks a lot smaller than its counterparts. Also, not to forget, it looks a lot similar to the small diameter bomb when it opens its wing, animated in our recent video. Let's take a look at the interiors and parts of the missile. At the front is the sensor cover, just beside it is the standoff fuse. Sandwiched between it is the infrared sensor and IMU, or in full form the inertial measurement unit, which helps calculate the IMU work in part by detecting changes in pitch, roll, and yaw. Here lies the weapon activating switch or sensor. Just like the Javelin missile, it has a 2-weapons payload. This is the precursor bomb.
I think also Estonian Carl Gustav anti-tank has the tandem round. RPG also has a tandem. I think the first explosion will penetrate through the armor of the armored vehicle, and the second explosion explodes inside of it, killing the crew and destroying the equipment inside. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but most of anti-tank weapons, shoulder-fired missiles, use 2 explosive warheads.
And just behind it is the follow-through bomb, which we will be explaining further in the videos ahead. Moving to the back, the cylinder-looking object is the accumulator, which is a storage device in a hydraulic circuit to draw quick energy when required. This is the air intake extension. It runs all the way towards this engine fitted with this microturbo TRI-60. It is a small, expendable turbojet engine developed by France.
It is insane. If you look at this video, this missile is a marvel of engineering in itself. It has chips, engines, computers, brains, anything in it, a bomb, sensors, and all to get this missile into a point to explode it all. It's weird to think that they are one-time use. I mean, such an expensive thing. This is why it is obsolete. It's a very perfect weapon, but the price of it makes it obsolete. You have to make all of these parts then to be destroyed, because 2.2 million for a missile like that a drone can do nowadays for 40,000, for example. Ukraine has one of the best drone production lines in the world right now. They're mass-producing cheap first-person view drones. Of course, they're not low detection on the radar like this missile is, but that's not the point. If you mass-produce them and mass-send them to the front, you overwhelm the enemy air defenses. And even if the enemy uses air defenses against it, the missile that they will be using is much more expensive than the drone. So these designs, extremely expensive, high-tech designs, I think, at least with the war in Ukraine, are a little bit obsolete, although they work in a great effect, but they will run out quickly because they're so expensive.
Let's move to the back of the missile. These are the two dorsal fins. Just beside it is the horizontal control surfaces. Moving below them are the ventral fins. But how do cruise missiles fly without traditional wings? Unlike standard aircraft, cruise missiles do not have advanced wings for lift and control. Instead, they rely on advanced propulsion systems, aerodynamic design, and sophisticated guidance systems to navigate and maintain stable flight. Here's a simplified explanation of how cruise missiles fly without advanced wings. Propulsion. Cruise missiles use jet engines, ramjet engines, or rocket motors for propulsion. These engines generate thrust to propel the missile through the air. Control surfaces. Although cruise missiles lack traditional wings, they have control surfaces, such as fins and flaps. These surfaces can adjust their positions during flight to control the missile's direction, stabilize its flight, and make course corrections.
Yeah, he says it so simply right now, but every little fin and flap right here is separately controlled by a computer or by a chip, by a motherboard that analyzes where the missile is going, what flap to move in at what time for the missile to go that way. It's a marvel of engineering, a ton of wiring, a ton of code. Looking at the simple designs that Ukraine is using massively on the front lines right now, I would say this missile is over-engineered. It's like the German car versus the Soviet Lada. One works, but it's very ugly and uncomfortable, and the other one works also, and it's very over-engineered, it's very powerful, it's beautiful, it's very comfortable, but it's incredibly expensive. So each has their own purpose, each has their own use. But if UK and France would send all their Storm Shadows to Ukraine, Ukraine could use them all very fast. Because in that war, you need thousands.
Their positions during flight to control the missile's direction, stabilize its flight, and make course corrections. This system uses an IR seeker, a thermal homing head, and a terrain contour matching. Calculates the necessary adjustments to maintain the desired trajectory. By combining these elements, cruise missiles can achieve stable and controlled flight over long distances without the need for conventional wings. They rely on aerodynamic principles, propulsion systems, and advanced guidance technologies to reach their targets accurately. For now, we will look at the steps-by-steps format of how this works. Step 1. Aircraft releases the missile. Step 2. After a few seconds, the missile opens its two wings. Step 3. It first uses inertial and GPS for guidance at the first stage of the missile. Step 4. Drops to low cruising altitude and identifies its position using GPS, just like the animation shown here.
The low cruising altitude makes it possible to be shot down with shoulder-fired anti-air systems like, you could actually even use a Javelin to shoot it down, perhaps, or an Igla, or a Stinger, which, I mean, none of these the Russians have. And you have to be extremely precise and lucky to be able to do that, but it's possible. A bigger air defense system would probably not shoot it down because they will not see it on the radar. With a Stinger, it's only possible if you actually visually confirm it and point your Stinger analysis system to it, and it will find it, and then you can shoot it down. But on a radar, this missile will not appear.
As you can see, it flies below the radar and close to the hills and ground.
Yeah.
Step 5. At the final stage, a thermal homing head and a terrain contour matching are used to guide the missiles. This is how it works. It uses the IR sensor imaging infrared seeker to track and process images, helping it glide to its target. Step 6. It climbs to a higher altitude. This helps the command and control to even monitor the target in the dark using a two-way data link. For the final maneuver, the nose cone is jettisoned to allow a high-resolution thermographic camera or infrared homing to observe the target area. The missile then tries to locate its target based on its preloaded data information. If all is approved, it then dives to destroy the target.
It even has an infrared camera on it and an analysis system that you pre-fed the information, the description of what the object looks like, for example, or a photo of what it looks like. It compares the real image to the photo, and it find similarities, then boom, that's the target. This is insane engineering for me. Of course, the drones I mentioned that the Ukraine does, they don't have these capabilities. Plus, they don't have the satellite connections like this one does. A few of them have capabilities to see at night, the night vision. And this comparison of the target to the photo inserted before, I don't think the drones have that. They need a human operator, which this missile probably doesn't need. They can bring the price tag of this missile down and mass produce it, then voila, you get a perfect weapon. My friends, now let's very quickly go over the Russian losses of the past 24 hours. 11th of July, Russians have 540 liquidated personnel. Everything that is over 400 plus something, it's over 1 battalion tactical group per day. It is an irreplaceable loss for the Russians because they are doing a hidden mobilization right now. Putin does not want to declare any other limited or full mobilizations because the backlash from the last one in autumn of 2022 was horrible for him. So he's doing it secretly. He has deals with the leaders of schools, with the leaders of big employment. They are forcing their workers to go to war or their students to go to war. That is the hidden mobilization. But 540 liquidated per day, that is liquidating the army faster than Putin can secretly mobilize per day. 4 tanks destroyed, 17 armored personnel vehicles, 14 artillery systems and 4 MLRS systems, 1 helicopter, 7 UAVs, 21 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 8 special equipment. Overall, huge losses. Of course, people are waiting for 1,000 liquidated personnel. This is already huge. If you want to know how many Russian soldiers got wounded, multiply this 540 with 3. So we're talking about 1,500 wounded. This video comes to us from Dmitry, aka War Translated. Here we can see what is done to Russian mobics who refuse to go to the zero line. Russia still uses Storm Z units, which are units who are giving only 1 or 2 magazines and a Kalashnikov, no food, no medicine, no other equipment, and they're sent to lure out the Ukrainian artillery positions and machine gun positions, then for the Russian artillery to be able to target them. They're suicide squads, they're just named differently. And these people, they don't agree to be a suicide squad anymore, and this is what happens to them. I've been locked in this pit for refusing to go to the zero line. They're all alive, they're just sleeping. 8 people, a squad. We're sat here for 2 days. By the order of the armies, Zampalit, call sign April. In 9 months, we're not allowed to on leave. Some who have served for less than a year have been on leave twice. But here, we served for 9 months, no leave. Honestly, I've said it before, the fastest way for these Storm Z units to get out of this war is to give themselves into POWs to the Ukrainians, because the Russians will kill them before let them out of this front line. They need these meat battalions, biomass. But Ukrainians will gladly take them into the exchange fund of prisoners, because the more Russian prisoners they can get, the more Azovstal commanders or Azov fighters they can get back by exchanging them, especially pilots, for example. Russians need pilots. If they want to get away from the zero line, they gotta give themselves in. We have no commanders to go to the zero line with no vehicles, no evacuation, no radio comms. Thrown like dogs into tree line and not equipped. So you just described the whole tactic right now. These 3 lines, let's take any random one. For example, this one here, it's a little bit thicker than a windbreak, but they will be thrown by their superiors with weapons and 2 magazines into this area. For example, the armored personnel carriers will leave, and they then have a choice then to fight the Ukrainians, because they cannot go back, they will be shot. And the Ukrainians are shooting at them. They don't really have a choice at all but to die there with a rifle against a tank. Army of Russia, this is how we fight. It shows you well that not much has changed with the tactics from Stalin era to nowadays. There was supposed to be the Soviet Union in between, analyzing all of their mistakes in the Second World War and writing new doctrines, and they did. Russia is not fighting according to their own doctrines. Meat battalions are not part of Russia's doctrines. This is Stalin's tactics, and Putin is going straight back to Stalin's tactics. Russian doctrines, if you read the book of how Russia fights, they have actually a book about it, like the official military doctrine book. They have very sophisticated doctrines there, but they require a lot of training, years of training, which Russia, they don't do, even in peacetime. So it's not possible to pull off these frontline strategies because your troops are not trained like that. So meet battalions, that's the answer. We watched another quick video from Dmitry about another Storm Z unit. These are convicts who are turning to Putin, the Tsar, personally, in hopes of him fixing their situation, not knowing that it was Putin himself who created this situation for them. He knows very well about the meat battalions. Dear citizens, Vladimir Vladimirovich, we decided to appeal to you for help. Only you can help in our situation, and all the citizens of Russian Federation. You can see the Russian mindset in this very simple sentence. Dear Tsar, only you can help. But the Tsar is who made this situation. So these people are so brainwashed in their boxes, they turn to the guy who actually is the source of their suffering. Putin's propaganda of 23 years by now has been relentless and unfortunately very effective. His own meat battalions and biomass are asking him for mercy. We ended up in a difficult situation and decided to do this. On 11th of May, we signed a contract with the Ministry of Defense voluntarily. Voluntarily, we went to the special military operation. During signing of the contract, we were informed we would be on the second and third lines. Well, that's the joke the Russian Ministry of Defense said to the mobilized, the mobics and the convicts. You will not take part in action on second or third line. And then, boom, suddenly forced into Bakhmut meat grinder immediately. That's the trick they use, hidden mobilization and lies. After the first assaults, we realized something wrong was happening. No, they were exactly where they were supposed to be. We pulled the wounded who stayed there for 5 days after the assault on the 29th. No one was going to take them out. We got into assault to do tasks given to us by people who we never seen. They sent us into a massacre. Out of 110 people in our company, less than 25 remained, and every day our guys returned wounded. The dead stay there. Yeah, well, I came from Ukraine about 3 days ago, and the soldiers showed us they liberated some new areas near Bakhmut recently, the 3rd Assault Brigade. We talked to them, and these guys showed us photos of Russian troops' corpses on the ground. They liberate an area, right? And then there's suddenly skeletons, not rotting corpses, but skeletons. These are soldiers who have been left there from the first 5-6 months of war, and they have been laying on the side of the road for 1 year, fully decomposed. I mean, the clothing looked better than the skeleton. So the Russians really don't even pick up their dead for the sanitary reasons. They just leave them to rot. Finally, we have proof of Ukrainians weaponizing animals. I mean, we have all heard about the Russian propaganda of Ukrainians using locusts in Donbass to destroy Russian crops, Ukrainians weaponizing pigeons against the Russians, and now we have this video of a Ukrainian soldier in a bus with a raccoon. It's obviously a weaponized raccoon. I'm waiting for the Russian propaganda to pick it up. My friends, I now want to thank 5 new patrons, and as I do on this channel, if you're new to the channel, I butcher their names with my Estonian pronunciation, so get ready for your ears to bleed. These people are the people who have supported this channel for many years now, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Rob McIntyre, Shannon Novaki, Mark Levis, Bill Barnes, Albert Christopher Hunton, Steven Mempa. Yes, Steven, I remember your name. I've said it for 5-6 times. I guess you resubscribe every time. Well, it's not illegal. Carry on, my friend. I'll be saying your name until your ears bleed. Thank you to these people. The Patreon link is in the description below, and it's the fastest way to support the channel. My friends, I would guide you to my Twitter account, because 3 times a day you get the most important news about Russia-Ukrainian war in the most compact form possible. So I'll see you there. Another place is Instagram, because I'm going to Kiev quite often, to Ukraine, to give cars to the units, to give night visions, to deliver something you want me to deliver, for example drones, and everything, every photo and video I will post on my Instagram. So keep an eye on my Kiev Ukrainian trips. I'll see you in my Instagram. And until my next video, my friends, Slava Ukraini.